What would you do if the dying man on your hospital bed turned out to be the father who abandoned you at birth and didn't even recognize your face? He didn't recognize the sound of his daughter's heartbeat, not when she held a stethoscope to his chest, not when she carefully adjusted the IV drip, not even when she said his name with a softness only blood could carry. Elijah Warren was just another tired old man lying in a hospital bed that day. He had no idea that the doctor saving his life was one of the 3 daughters he abandoned decades ago. But to understand that moment, we have to go back to the beginning. Back to the day Ruth Delaney was cast out of her husband's home like yesterday's shame. Ruth wasn't a poor woman. She had hands that could stretch $1, a heart that could hold storms, and a spirit that bowed for no one. Elijah, a respected carpenter in their town, had married her with pride. She was soft-spoken, graceful, and devout. The kind of woman everyone said would bring peace to a man's life. But peace didn't come easily, not in a house where every corner echoed with expectation. In the first 3 years of their marriage, Ruth suffered 2 devastating miscarriages. The second one nearly took her life. And after that, Clara Warren, Elijah's mother, changed. The whispers became louder, the disapproval more visible. She brought bad luck, Clara would mutter while cooking yam in the kitchen. Before she came, everything was fine. At first, Elijah defended Ruth. "It's not her fault, Ma," he'd say. "The doctor said these things happen." But soon, even he began to pull away. The bed grew colder, the silence longer. Ruth noticed. She always did, but she didn't complain. She just folded her pain into prayer. In their 4th year of marriage, a miracle finally arrived. She was pregnant again. This time, she told no one but Elijah. She moved gently, ate sparingly, and stayed indoors. By the 7th month, her belly was larger than usual. The nurse smiled and said, "Maybe it's twins." But on a humid morning just before dawn, Ruth gave birth to 3 healthy girls. 3. The first screamed like thunder. The second came quietly. The third needed coaxing but finally let out a cry. The nurse wrapped them in cotton cloths and laid them beside their mother. Ruth didn't care that they were girls. They were alive. She was alive. That was enough. But not for Elijah. When the nurse told him, 3 girls, his face hardened. He didn't smile. He didn't enter the room. He just walked away. Instead, Clara entered, arms folded, lips pressed tight. She looked at the babies and said, "This is what we waited for? After all these years?" Ruth tried to plead. "Mama, they are healthy." "They are your granddaughters." But Clara turned her back. "This family needs sons," she said. That night, Elijah finally came in. He looked at the 3 newborns for a long moment, then at the woman who bore them. "You can't stay here," he said flatly. Ruth thought she misheard. "What?" "You can stay a few days to recover," Elijah said, "but after that, you leave." She begged. She cried. She reminded him of their vows. He didn't budge. 3 days later, Ruth Delaney walked away from that house, a baby on her back and 2 in her arms. No carriage. No help. Only swollen feet, a nylon bag with 2 dresses, and a heart torn into 3. No one came to see her off. The village watched her pass like a passing storm, uncomfortable but temporary. They were wrong. Ruth wasn't a storm. She was the seed of something stronger. She would raise Ava, Sophie, and Lily Delaney, not just to survive, but to shine. And Elijah? He had just discarded the greatest blessings he would ever be given. But fate, like Ruth, doesn't forget so easily, and neither do daughters. Ruth Delaney didn't look back. Her feet were still swollen from labor. Her blouse was stained with breast milk. A baby was tied to her back, the other 2 nestled in her arms. And yet, she walked. Past the gate where Elijah once kissed her. past the market where women now whispered. She had no home, no plan, only a desperate will to protect what little she had left. Her daughters. The road to Umber Ridge was long and quiet. Every step pressed against fresh pain. Her legs trembled, her waist ached. Still, she walked. At the edge of the neighboring town, she sat on a bench beside a provision kiosk. The shopkeeper, a woman with graying braids and sharp eyes, emerged from the shadows. "Did you just give birth?" she asked. Ruth nodded. "Triplets?" the woman gasped. Again, Ruth only nodded. Her throat was too dry for words. The woman disappeared inside. Ruth had seen that reaction before. Pity. Judgment. Silence. But a few minutes later, she returned with a bowl of warm pap and a tin cup of water. "Eat," she said. "You can't nurse 3 babies on an empty stomach." Ruth's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. Later that night, she found shelter on the bench of a rundown health clinic. One of the night guards let her stay in the corridor. She laid out 2 wrappers on the cold floor and placed her daughters gently on them. That night, under flickering fluorescent lights and the hum of distant generators, she gave her girls their names. Ava, the loud one, because she came into the world screaming with life. Sophie, the quiet one, because her silence was strength, not weakness. And Lily, the smallest, because even the smallest flower could grow wild and brilliant. By morning, word had spread. "There's a woman with triplets at the clinic." Some came to stare. A few brought old baby clothes. One man handed her a loaf of bread. Another gave a can of powdered milk that was close to expiry. It wasn't much, but it helped. 2 weeks later, an old widow named Mrs. Amos came to see her. "I have a room behind my house. It's not fancy, but it's dry and safe." Ruth followed her without hesitation. The room had a curtain for a door, no window, and a cracked cement floor. When it rained, the ceiling leaked. But Ruth was grateful. She had a roof, she had her daughters, and she had breath in her body. That was enough. She did what she could to survive. She washed clothes, fetched water, sold roasted peanuts in paper cones on street corners. Sometimes she skipped meals so her daughters wouldn't have to. No one saw her cry, not in public, not in pity. Only in the quiet of night, when her girls were asleep, did her tears roll freely. When they fell sick, she carried them back to that same clinic. The nurses liked her. One of them nursed Bella began to teach her how to manage minor illnesses. "You're smart," Bella said. "If you'd had schooling, you'd be one of us." Ruth just smiled. School had never been an option for her, but survival that she knew by heart. The triplets grew fast. By 3, their personalities shone like colors in a sunrise. Ava was bold and curious. She asked questions Ruth couldn't answer and repeated grown-up phrases with comic timing. Sophie was quiet, always observing, memorizing every detail in a room. Lily was fire. She climbed everything, knocked things over, and loved to see Ruth's reaction. Every morning, Ruth tied one on her back and held the other 2 by the hand. They walked together like a tiny parade. Some people smiled. Others whispered, "3 girls? Still no father?" But Ruth ignored it all. Her eyes stayed forward. When the girls turned 5, she scraped enough money to enroll them in school. 1 set of uniforms, shared pencils, shared notebooks. The teacher asked where their father was. Ava replied without hesitation, "We don't have one. We have Mommy." The teacher never asked again. That year, Ruth took out a small loan from a local women's group and started frying a Caribbean cakes by the roadside. Her food was good, her hands steady. Customers came from other towns to buy her golden, crispy cakes. With the profit, she bought a small foam mattress. No more sleeping on mats. Still, she never spoke badly of Elijah. When the girls asked, she simply said, Some people leave because they don't know how to stay. But you, my girls, you were worth staying for. She taught them to work hard, to speak up, to expect nothing but earn everything. Back in Elijah's world, things had changed. He remarried. His new wife, Marissa, was a school teacher. She got pregnant quickly, and Elijah puffed with pride. "A boy," he bragged. "Finally." But when the child came, little Noah joy faded fast. Noah was sickly. From the first weeks, he struggled to breathe, to feed, to sleep. Every cough turned into a crisis. Elijah sold his tools, his bike, even borrowed money for hospital bills. Nothing helped. And Ruth? She kept working. Her girls were growing. Every night, she placed small bills in a wooden box hidden under her mattress, for school fees, for emergencies, for dreams. She never cursed Elijah, but she never forgot him either. When Ava asked one night why her mother worked so hard, Ruth answered softly, "Because I want you to know what it feels like to be chosen." And chosen they were. By a mother the world called unlucky. By a woman the world tried to break. By Ruth Delaney, the woman who was never anyone's burden, only their blessing. By the time Ava, Sophie, and Lily turned 8, the whispers in the village had faded into background noise. People no longer said the triplets with no father. Now they simply said the Delaney girls. Each name began to carry weight. Avate. Bold One had started fixing broken radios for neighbors. Nobody had shown her how. She'd just watched an old repairman outside her school for weeks and then began tinkering with discarded appliances behind their home. At age 10, she rewired the neighbor's kerosene stove to burn cleaner. "She's got the hands of a man," someone said once. "No," Ruth replied. "She has the hands of a creator." Sophie was different. She had fallen in love with books, not just school books, but any book she could get her hands on. She borrowed worn novels from the headmaster's daughter, studied medical leaflets from the clinic, and asked Nurse Bella more questions than the staff could answer. She didn't want to be a nurse, though. "I want to be a doctor," she told her mother one evening. Ruth's eyes welled up. Not because she doubted it, but because she believed it. And Lily, the youngest, was already breaking the rules no one had written for her. She was drawn to the school's old computer, dusty, slow, and always half-broken. While the other kids lost interest, Lily stayed after class, poking through programs, asking questions the teachers couldn't even understand. One day, when the system crashed, she stayed late and fixed it. She was 10. Nobody taught them how to dream, they just did. And Ruth, she simply made sure the soil was good enough for those dreams to grow. She woke before sunrise every day, fried bean cakes by the roadside, cleaned houses on weekends, saved every penny she could. There was no luxury, but there was structure. There was discipline. There was peace. She kept a small wooden box under the bed, hidden beneath their only mattress. Inside, she slipped folded Bill's school money. Exam money, emergency money, and when that money wasn't enough, she didn't complain. She simply worked harder. Sometimes she cried at night, but never in fear, only in worry. Worry that she wouldn't be able to keep up with how fast her girls were rising. Then came the day that changed everything. The headmaster came to visit. He was sweating in his Sunday shirt, sitting on a stool outside Ruth's door. "Ma'am," he said, "your girls are exceptional. I think they should sit for the national scholarship exam next year." Ruth looked down. "Money is the problem." He nodded, understanding. "I can speak to a few NGOs. Maybe someone can help." That night, Ruth didn't sleep. She sat with a bowl of water, washing her girls' school uniforms by hand, her mind racing. The next morning, she sold more akara than usual and quietly slipped half the profit into the wooden box, She didn't tell her daughters anything. She just fed them well that week boiled eggs with their rice, extra mangoes after dinner. She ironed their uniforms herself. "You do your best," she said. "Don't worry about the rest." They nodded, with the kind of silent confidence only children who've walked through fire can possess. When the scholarship results came 2 weeks later, the entire neighborhood erupted. Ava, Sophie, Lily, top 3 in the entire local district. All 3 selected, all 3 sponsored through high school and university if they kept up their performance. People stared at Ruth differently after that. "She really raised them well," someone whispered at the water well. But Ruth said nothing. She just kept working. Their house still had a leaking roof. The floor was still bare. But now, a second-hand laptop had entered their home, a gift from one of the NGO staff. That laptop changed everything. Lily took to it like a bird to sky. She taught herself coding. Sat cross-legged on the cement floor, fingers flying over keys, eyes fixed on glowing screens. She began building small apps, then working on cloud systems for neighborhood businesses. Sophie used the laptop to study anatomy. She downloaded medical PDFs, watched surgery videos, and took notes like a college student. Ava started designing buildings with free online tools. She printed floor plans at the town's cyber cafe, sometimes using her snack money to pay the printing fee. Ruth often sat in the corner at night and watched them, her arms folded, a quiet fire in her chest. Her daughters weren't surviving, they were thriving. And it all began in silence, in sacrifice, in the quiet resilience of a woman the world dismissed. They weren't rich, not in money, but in ambition. In character, they were wealthy beyond measure. One night, Sophie found Ruth sitting outside on the wooden stool, staring at the moon. "Mommy, are you okay?" Ruth smiled. "I'm just thinking." "About what?" She looked at her daughter, eyes soft. "How far we've come." Sophie sat beside her and rested her head on her mother's shoulder. "We're not there yet," she said, "but we're getting close." Ruth nodded. Close was enough for now, because the girls she raised without permission were becoming the women she always dreamed the world would one day need. Back in Yuma Creek, life had not been kind to Elijah Warren. After Ruth walked away with his 3 newborn daughters, he remarried within a year. His new wife, Marissa Bennett, was younger, well-spoken, and a schoolteacher. His mother, Clara, called her a fresh start. When Marissa got pregnant 6 months into the marriage, Elijah puffed with pride again. He told neighbors, "My real destiny is arriving." But the boy they named Noah Warren was born fragile. From his 3rd week of life, Noah struggled to breathe. He couldn't feed properly. His cries were weak, his body small. Every little cough turned into a crisis. They were always rushing him to the clinic, always praying for the next breath. Elijah sold his generator to pay hospital bills, then his motorbike. Eventually, he stopped going to work altogether. His carpentry shed grew silent. Tools rusted under a tarp. The phone stopped ringing. He borrowed money from cousins, then neighbors, then from people he had once turned his nose up at. But he never mentioned Ruth, never mentioned Ava, Sophie, or Lily. It was like they had never existed. He buried them deep beneath the regret he refused to name. By the time Noah turned 12, the boy still couldn't run without gasping for air. His lungs were weak. Every birthday was more of a prayer than a celebration. And Marissa? She had grown tired. She took a teaching job in the city and started coming home only on weekends. "This boy's sickness is not normal," she snapped one evening, slamming her purse down. "I'm the one carrying this family." "And what are you doing?" Elijah had no answers. He sat quietly, staring at the floor. She kept shouting, "You let your past ruin us. You rejected your own blood and still ended up empty-handed." He didn't respond. Not because she was wrong, but because he had no strength left to defend himself. His body was growing thin. His coughs were deeper. His dreams dimmer. He still remembered the day Ruth walked away. The look in her eyes. The babies wrapped in worn cloth. The silence of his own heart. But he told himself he made the right choice. 3 girls, after all. What could they have given him? Everything. One night, Noah had a severe crisis. His lips turned blue. His fingers curled tight. They rushed him to the hospital, but there was no oxygen, no doctors, no pain relievers. He died before sunrise. Elijah sat on the plastic bench in the hallway, holding his son's hand long after it had grown cold. He couldn't speak, couldn't cry, but when they got home and Marissa started packing her things, the tears finally came. "I told you," she yelled, flinging clothes into a duffel bag. "This poverty, this curse, it came the day you turned your back on your blood." She paused only to grab her gold earrings and a stainless steel pot. "Men like you always think sons will fix everything." But it was never about gender. It was about faithfulness. She left that afternoon. Elijah didn't try to stop her. 2 months later, he heard she had remarried in a nearby town. The house grew quieter than ever. Even the wind seemed to avoid his doorstep. Then came the eviction. The landlord gave him 1 month. "I'm sorry, Elijah," he said, "but I need someone who can pay. This is business." So Elijah packed his remaining clothes, a Bible, and an old photo of Noah at age 5, his only proof that the boy ever smiled. He moved into a half-finished concrete structure outside the village. No roof on one side, no windows, just mosquitoes and wind and ghosts. He laid mosquito nets over the door and slept on cold cement. And at night, when the wind howled through the holes in the wall, he thought of Ruth, of the triplets, of the midwife who once told him, "These girls are a blessing, don't reject them." But he had rejected life itself. He hadn't seen them in 13 years. He didn't know if they were alive, didn't know they were now women, didn't know they were thriving without him. He told himself they probably hated him. Maybe they had forgotten him. Maybe that was better. Until one day, he collapsed on the side of the road. The cough had gotten worse. He couldn't make it to the chemist. A stranger picked him up and rushed him to a hospital in the city. They called it St. Teresa's Community Hospital. He was admitted under the free care fund, no ID, no relatives, no one to call. The nurses were kind, but busy. No one sat with him for long until one young doctor arrived on her rounds. Her voice was soft but firm. Her hands were sure. Her presence was calm. "Sir," she said, gently touching his arm. "We're going to help you. Just rest for now." He blinked through tired eyes. He didn't recognize her. Not even a hint of familiarity. But she knew who he was, because that woman, Dr. Sophie Delaney, was the second daughter he once threw away. And though she never told him that night, not at first, she felt something shift in the air as she walked away from his bedside. Some kind of reckoning had arrived. The hallway at St. Teresa's Hospital smelled of antiseptic and fate. Dr. Sophie Delaney had seen hundreds of patients in her short but impactful career, but something about this man in bed 16 lingered. His vitals were fragile, his silence deeper than most, and his eye haunted. She didn't know his story, not yet. But her mother's voice echoed in her head. Sometimes the past finds you when you're not even looking. Sophie updated his chart every morning. She made sure he ate. She never told him her name. She just cared. Until one morning, while checking his drip, she finally asked, "Sir, do you have any children?" Elijah Warren stared at the wall for a long time. "I did once," he whispered. "But I lost them." Sophie's hand froze for a moment before continuing her note. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said. He didn't respond. That evening, at home, she sat in silence, staring at a childhood photo of herself and her sisters, Ava and Lilière, wearing the same school uniform, smiling with missing teeth. Could it be? Could this frail, broken man be the same father who had thrown them out? She wanted to dismiss the thought. Coincidences happen. But her spirit wouldn't let it rest, so she called the one person who would know for sure. Across town, Ruth Delaney was folding laundry on her porch when the phone rang. "Mommy," Sophie's voice came through, calm but strange. "I have a patient, an older man." No family, no money, collapsed on the street. Ruth's brow furrowed. "Okay. He says his name is Elijah. Elijah Warren." Silence. Ruth sat down slowly. "Elijah," she repeated. "Are you sure?" "He said he had children, but lost them." There was a long pause. Then Ruth said softly, "Don't tell him who you are." "Why not?" "Because sometimes the truth needs time to breathe." 2 days passed. Elijah's condition stabilized. He could walk a few steps, drink broth without choking. The nurses liked him quiet, polite, but no one visited. No one asked for him. No one even called. Then on Saturday morning, a taxi pulled into the hospital driveway. Ruth stepped out, wearing a simple blue dress, her hair wrapped in a white scarf. She walked straight to the reception and asked for her daughter. When Sophie appeared, her eyes widened. "Mum, what are you doing here?" "Take me to him," Ruth said. "Now." Together, they walked down the hallway. Sophie's heart thumped like thunder in a quiet sky. They reached bed 16. Elijah was sitting up, eating rice with shaking hands. When he looked up and saw her, the spoon dropped. His mouth fell open. "Ruth?" he gasped. She said nothing. He tried to stand, but his knees buckled. The bed caught him. You're here," he whispered. "After all these years." Sophie stepped back, watching them both like a scene in a play. "Mom," she asked quietly, "do you know this man?" Ruth turned to her daughter, her voice calm but steady. "This is your father." Sophie blinked. "The man who threw them out. The man who called them bad luck. And now, this?" Elijah began to cry. Loud, broken sobs from the depths of a man who had lost everything. "I didn't know," he wept. "I didn't recognize you. Are you really my daughter?" Sophie's eyes didn't blink. She turned to her mother. "How did you forgive him?" Ruth looked at her daughter carefully. "I didn't forgive him for his sake. I forgave him for mine." They left the room. Elijah sat there, surrounded by everything he'd thrown away. He didn't ask for anything. He couldn't. He didn't deserve it. Back at Sophie's home that evening, Ruth pulled out an old photo album, pages worn soft from years of handling. Birthday cakes made from leftover bread, first report cards, 3 girls in hand-me-down dresses, standing tall like queens without a crown. "He missed it all," Sophie said, flipping through the pages. Ruth nodded. "But we didn't." Sophie looked at her mother. "I want to help him, but I don't want him in our lives." "You don't have to," Ruth said gently. "Helping someone doesn't mean letting them back in. It just means we're not them." The next morning, Sophie returned to the hospital. She sat by Elijah's bed. He looked up, eyes swollen. "I didn't deserve your kindness," he said. Sophie stayed quiet for a moment, then said, "I was 7 when I fainted from hunger at school." He looked away. "I was 12 when I decided to become a doctor because I didn't want anyone to suffer like Mom did." Her voice didn't crack. It sharpened. "We sold firewood to buy our exam forms. We studied under candlelight. And we made it." Elijah wept. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Sophie stood. There's a social care program for elderly patients with no support. You'll be transferred there once you're stable. He nodded, broken. But after that, she added, we go our separate ways. Then she turned and walked away. That night, under a mango tree behind her mother's new bungalow, Sophie sat with Ava and Lily, all three women in their prime, sipping tea and laughing at old memories. Ava spoke first. He asked for us. Wants to see us. Lily raised an eyebrow. Are we going? Sophie shook her head. We already forgave him. They all nodded. Forgiveness didn't require reunion. Later, Ruth stood by the window, watching her daughters under the moonlight. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer not for the man who left, but for the daughters who stayed. They were never bad luck. They were the miracle he didn't see. It had been 3 months since the quiet goodbye at the hospital. Dr. Sophie Delaney went back to her rounds, her days filled with life and death, charts and choices. She never told her colleagues the man in bed 16 was her biological father. It didn't matter now. Back in Ume's, Ruth Delaney continued her morning routines, sweeping the veranda, watering the garden, folding dried clothes. But something was different in the air. The girls were grown now. Ava, the mechanical engineer, had flown in from Abuja for a surprise weekend visit. Lily, the tech prodigy, arrived from Lagos 2 hours later. For the first time in years, the triplets were home together again. There was laughter in the backyard. Groundnuts crackled in a small iron pan. Ava teased Lily about her silent boyfriend. Lily fired back about Ava's obsession with tools and overalls. And Sophie? She just smiled, for once letting herself be the quiet one. Ruth watched them from the doorway, arms folded across her chest, her face soft. Girls, she finally said. They turned to her. Come sit. I have something for you. They followed her into the living room. She brought out a small, flat box wrapped in faded Ankara cloth. What's this? Ava asked. Open it, Ruth said. Inside were dozens of photos, most worn at the corners, some curled with age. There were school certificates, a childhood drawing of a stick family under a sun, a pressed flower from a birthday card. These are our lives, Lily whispered. Yes, Ruth nodded. Everything I kept. Every award, every report card, every little note from your teachers. You didn't have a father to clap for you, but I made sure your journey was never forgotten. Sophie touched one of the photos gently. It was her, age 5, standing barefoot in front of their first rented room, holding a plastic stethoscope. Mom, Ava said, voice catching, you really carried everything. Ruth smiled faintly. I carried what mattered. There was silence. Then Sophie spoke. He's still in the care home. The nurses say he's quiet, doesn't ask for much. Lily looked up. Has he ever written? Called? Sophie shook her head. No. Ruth leaned forward. He's lost everything. His name, his family, even the house he once thought was too good for daughters. But this, she gestured to the room around them. This is legacy. Not his name. Ava nodded. We didn't need his name. They all agreed. That weekend, the triplets took their mother to the city for the first time. They visited Ava's engineering firm, where she was leading a team on a solar-powered housing project. Ruth wore her best wrapper and gasped at the 3D models. You built this? Ava laughed. With my mind first, then with my hands. At the hospital, Ruth toured Sophie's floor. Doctors nodded respectfully as they passed. Dr. Delaney, is this your mother? Sophie beamed. Yes. The woman who built me without ever holding a scalpel. And in Lily's tech hub, Ruth marveled at the computers, the blinking servers, the clean white boards covered in code. You speak this language? Lily shrugged. It listens to me. Ruth chuckled. I used to bribe you with fried plantains to say 3 words. Now machines obey. They all laughed. But in Ruth's heart, A quiet storm brewed. Gratitude, pride, and grief. Because none of this known had come from the man who helped bring them into the world. It had come from struggle, from sweat, from prayer, and from a woman who refused to let rejection define her. That night, after the city lights dimmed and the house was still, Ruth sat with Sophie alone. "Do you hate him?" Ruth asked softly. Sophie shook her head. "I did. But now, no, I feel nothing." "That's okay," Ruth said. "You don't have to feel anything. He made that choice when he shut the door." Sophie looked down. "Do you think he regrets it?" Ruth hesitated. "I think regret is the first step, but it's not the same as redemption. Redemption takes more than tears." Sophie nodded. "I gave him my silence," she said, "not my forgiveness." "That's fair," Ruth replied. The next morning, the triplets packed to leave again. Hugs, photos, promises to call. Ruth stood at the gate as they pulled away, watching them like a gardener admiring a blooming tree. Her daughters had become women. Not in spite of abandonment, but in defiance of it. As the sun rose higher, she whispered to herself, "They carry my name, my lessons, my scars, and that's more powerful than any father's surname." At St. Teresa's Hospital in Enugu, Dr. Sophie Delaney moved through the corridors like always, confident, focused, and respected. But something shifted inside her, ever since the man in bed 16 had looked into her eyes and unknowingly thanked the daughter he once abandoned. She hadn't told her sisters everything. Not yet, she wasn't ready, but she had told her mother. And Ruth Delaney, now in her 60s but still graceful and grounded, had come all the way to Enugu to confirm with her own eyes that the man on that hospital bed was indeed Elijah Warren, the same man who had banished her with newborns in her arms. And now, a week later, Sophie found herself visiting him again. Bed 16, curtains drawn. The same weary figure lay propped up on a pillow, his frame thinner now, but his eyes clearer. He looked up as she approached. "Doctor," he said, his voice more stable than before. Sophie didn't respond right away. She adjusted the IV drip, then sat gently on the edge of the chair beside him. "You're improving," she said. He gave a faint nod. "Thanks to you." Silence filled the space. Finally, he asked, "What's your name?" She didn't look at him. "Dr. Delaney." His face twitched at the sound of it. "Delaney," he echoed. He stared at the ceiling. "I once knew someone with that name." She finally turned. "You knew her well," she said evenly. "You were married to her." His body stiffened. Then he closed his eyes. "I thought I saw Ruth in your mother's eyes," he whispered. Sophie looked at him carefully. "That's because you did." That evening, Sophie called her sisters. They gathered on a video call, Ava in Abuja, Lily in Lagos. Sophie told them everything. The hospital, the patient, the name, the photo album Ruth had brought as proof. They were silent for a moment. Then Ava spoke first. "Do you feel anything?" "Conflicted," Sophie admitted. "I don't hate him. But I don't feel peace either." Lily didn't say much. She just stared, then finally asked, "Is he dying?" "No," Sophie replied. "But he's alone. And no one's coming for him." More silence. Then Ava leaned forward on her screen. "Let's go visit." The following weekend, the three sisters walked into St. Teresa's together for the first time. No stethoscopes, no laptops, no tools, just three grown women carrying a shared history. Nurses turned their heads as they passed, three women, strong and confident, moving like a storm. When they reached the ward, Sophie pulled the curtain. Elijah was awake. He saw them. He blinked, then blinked again, and then he wept. No words, just sobs. Ava was the first to speak. "You don't get to cry like that," she said coldly. "You gave that up when you told our mother to walk out your gate." Lily crossed her arms. "You don't even remember our names, do you?" Elijah tried to speak, but choked. Sophie stepped forward. "Let me help you remember." She pointed to Ava. "This is Ava. The one who fixes buildings stronger than the one you chased us from." Then Lily. "This is Lily. She works with companies in countries you've never been to." And finally, she touched her own chest. "And I'm Dr. Sophie Delaney, the one who helped stabilize your blood pressure and checked your vitals, while you thanked me with the same lips that once cursed our birth." Elijah was shaking now. "I was afraid," he whispered. "No," Ava cut in. "You were proud. You were weak." "You chose shame over love," Lily added. Sophie leaned closer. "I don't need an apology," she said, voice calm. "But I do need you to understand we made it without you." He covered his face and wept harder. No one reached to comfort him. After a few minutes, Sophie stood. "There's a community care program for abandoned seniors. I've arranged for you to be transferred there once you're stable." "You'll be looked after," Lily added, "but not by us." Elijah looked up. You're leaving?" Sophie nodded. "Yes." Ava turned before walking out. "We forgave you, not to bring you back into our lives, but to keep your bitterness from ruining ours." Then they left. Together. That night, Ruth Delaney sat on the porch of her small bungalow, the one her daughters built her. She held the phone to her ear as Sophie recounted the visit. When her daughter finished, Ruth didn't speak right away. Then she said softly, "I'm proud of you, baby." Sophie's voice cracked. "Mom, how did you do it?" "Do what?" "Love us so fiercely, and yet never teach us to hate him?" Ruth smiled through the line. "Because if I let hate raise you, it would have turned you into him." It had been 3 months since the sisters walked out of the hospital room, leaving Elijah Warren in tears, tucked beneath the thin sheets of a bed that was never meant to feel like home. But the world didn't wait. Life moved forward. And so did the women he once called a burden. Back in Abuja, Ava Delaney was leading a new engineering project for a green infrastructure company, her face now featured in a local business magazine for women in STEM. She didn't have time to cry about a man who walked out of her life when she was a newborn. Her steel, her vision, had been forged in the fire of absence. In Lagos, Lily Delaney rarely left her home office. She was now working full-time with an international cybersecurity firm, consulting on back-end systems for companies in Germany and the UK. She rarely spoke about her father, but sometimes late at night, she would pause during a coding session, lean back, and stare at the wall as if trying to make sense of what forgiveness should mean when you've never been given an apology. And in Enugu, Dr. Sophie Delaney returned to her rounds. She no longer flinched at bed 16. There was a new patient there now. But sometimes when she passed, she would glance inside, just to remind herself that she could face the ghosts and still walk away with grace. At their mother's home in Umuzi, a soft rain fell as Ruth Delaney sat with a steaming mug of tea. Her home had changed over the years, no more leaking ceilings or cracked floors. Her daughters had rebuilt her life quite literally from the ground up, but some parts of her remained untouched. On her nightstand was a box of photographs, baby shoes, school portraits, scholarship letters. She didn't keep them out of sentimentality. She kept them as proof. Proof that love, when quiet and unshakable, could move mountains. One weekend, the triplets came home. No special occasion, no birthdays, just a quiet visit to the woman who never left them. They gathered under the mango tree in the backyard, just like old times. Ava brought stories about her latest project and how one male architect kept questioning her designs until she proved him wrong in front of the entire board. Lily talked about her work in artificial intelligence and how she was training young girls online through a free coding program she started. And Sophie? She stayed quiet. Until Ava nudged her. "Come on, you've got something to share." Sophie finally smiled. "I got an offer." They leaned in. "A research grant in the States. Internal medicine and rural healthcare systems. Fully funded." Ruth looked up from her chair, eyes wide. "You mean America?" Sophie nodded. They clapped. They laughed, they hugged, but then Ruth's smile softened. "And how do you feel?" she asked. Sophie took a long breath, excited. "Nervous, grateful." Then she paused. "And a little guilty." "Guilty?" Lily asked. Sophie turned to her mother. "For leaving." Ruth reached for her hand. "Baby, we raised you to fly, not to stay grounded out of obligation." That night, Ruth called Elijah. She hadn't spoken to him since the hospital. The number she dialed connected to the elderly care center where he'd been moved. A nurse answered. "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Warren is still here. Would you like to speak with him?" There was a long silence before Ruth replied. "No. Just tell him his daughters are doing fine." And she hung up. The next morning, Ruth found Ava in the kitchen making tea. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. Do you still think about him?" Ava stirred the honey into her cup. "Sometimes. And? I don't feel anything sharp anymore," she said. "It's like his absence used to be a wound. But now it's just a scar. It's there, but it doesn't ache." Ruth nodded slowly. "I just want to be sure," she said. Ava looked up. "About what?" "That you girls don't carry bitterness into your future. That what he did doesn't define the love you give or accept." Ava smiled. "Mom, we carry your strength, not his shadow." On Sunday morning, as the rain lifted, the triplets packed up to leave. Hugs were exchanged, bags were loaded, and just before Ava started the car, Sophie turned to her mother. "Do you think he ever really understood what he lost?" Ruth stared into the distance. "No," she said softly. "But that's not your burden to carry." As the car pulled away, Ruth stood on her porch, watching until it disappeared around the bend. She whispered under her breath, "Thank you, God. Not for the man who left, but for the daughters who stayed." 3 months after the sisters returned to their respective cities, life found its rhythm again. Ava Delaney was promoted to senior engineer. Her firm was expanding into renewable energy projects across West Africa, and her name was on the proposal headers now. Lily Delaney completed a major system overhaul for a German logistics company. She didn't say much, but a quiet email from her client read, "We've never seen cleaner back-end architecture. You've restored our trust in remote engineers." And Dr. Sophie Delaney was getting ready to leave Nigeria for her research fellowship in the US. Her visa had been approved, her bags were packed, her lab coat was folded with care. But there was one thing left unfinished. That evening, after dinner, Sophie sat beside her mother, Ruth Delaney, on the veranda. The air smelled of rain-soaked earth, and the stars peeked shyly through passing clouds. "Mom," she said. Ruth didn't answer, just looked at her daughter's hands, strong and graceful, resting in her lap. "Do you think I should go see him?" There was no need to clarify who. Ruth sighed. "That's your choice, Sophie. I won't ask you to go, and I won't ask you not to." "I don't know what I'd even say," Sophie admitted. "Then don't plan it. Just go, if your heart tells you." The next afternoon, Sophie took a bus to the care facility. She didn't call ahead, she didn't bring flowers, just herself. When she arrived, the nurse at the front desk recognized her immediately. "Room 12, he still remembers your face, you know." Sophie walked down the quiet corridor. Each step felt heavier. When she reached the doorway, she paused. Inside, Elijah Warren was sitting in a wheelchair, staring out the window. The sunlight caught the edges of his thin white hair. She knocked gently. He turned. At first, confusion flickered in his eyes. Then something softer. "You came," he whispered. Sophie stepped inside. "I leave next week," she said plainly. He nodded, not asking where or why. "You didn't have to," he added. "I know." They sat in silence for a moment. Elijah's voice cracked. "I think about that day often. The day I turned my back, on your mother, on you girls." Sophie kept her gaze steady. "You didn't just turn your back. You closed the door and threw away the key." He nodded. "I was afraid. I thought I was doing what was expected of me, what would restore my name." She folded her arms. "Your name wasn't broken. You just refused to carry the weight of daughters." He winced. "Do you hate me?" "No." He blinked. "I did," she said truthfully. "For a long time. But hate turns you into the very thing you're running from." He looked down at his hands veined, shaking. "Your mother," he said. "She was always stronger than me." "Yes," Sophie replied. "She raised warriors." The next day, Sophie left a letter with the nurse. It was addressed to Elijah. She didn't say goodbye in person. Inside the letter, she wrote, "I can't rewrite the past, and neither can you. But I am not defined by the man who abandoned me. I am defined by the woman who stayed. You were the beginning of my story, yes, but not the author. I hope you find peace. Sophie." Back in Umuzi, Ruth received a package in the mail. It was from Sophie. Inside was a framed photo. Sophie in her white coat, smiling at a conference podium in Atlanta. Tucked beside it was a simple note. "For everything you carried, so I could rise." Ruth pressed the photo to her chest and cried. Not tears of regret, tears of fulfillment. That weekend, Ava and Lily returned home. They didn't plan it. They just needed to. They sat with their mother beneath the mango tree. Ruth poured tea, and the three women spoke of ordinary things, projects, news, groceries, rain. Then Ruth asked, "Have either of you heard from your father?" They shook their heads. "I don't think he will reach out," Ava said. "Do you want him to?" Lily asked. Ruth paused. "No." She looked at them firmly. "I made peace with that chapter. My joy is not behind me, it's here in front of me, beside me." That night, Ava sat with Lily under the stars. "You ever wonder what kind of father he could have been?" she asked. Lily thought for a moment. "I used to." She pulled her knees to her chest. "But now, I think the man he was made the women we became." Ava raised her teacup. "To Ruth Delaney." Lily clinked hers. "To the quiet warrior who taught us everything." They didn't toast to Elijah. They didn't curse him either. They simply let him go. 2 years passed. The mango tree behind Ruth Delaney's house had grown taller, its leaves fuller, its shade broader. It had watched countless moments, a mother raising 3 daughters alone, teaching them strength without anger, grace without pride. And now it stood witness to something new. A black SUV pulled into the red dirt driveway. The door opened, and Sophie Delaney, now Dr. Sophie, stepped out in a tan suit, her stethoscope looped casually around her bag. She hadn't come alone. Behind her, Ava emerged in jeans and a company-branded jacket, a hard hat slung over one shoulder. And lastly, Lily, in an oversized hoodie, earbuds dangling, a laptop still open on her lap. 3 women, 3 stories, 1 shared route. They walked into their mother's house, their voices overlapping like old songs, laughing, arguing over tea, kissing her cheeks, holding her hands. And Ruth smiled, the quiet kind of smile that says, It was all worth it. That evening, they gathered outside beneath the mango tree. There were no speeches, no ceremonies, just a simple wooden plaque they planted in the soil. It read, "This home was built on love, not permission, in honor of Ruth Delaney, the mother who stayed." Later, as they sipped warm cocoa, Lily looked at her sisters. "I read something," she began. "It said sometimes the people who break us are just passing through, but the people who rebuild us, they're the ones who stay." Ava nodded. "And we rebuilt ourselves," Sophie added, "because Mom taught us how." They all turned to Ruth. She didn't say much, never had, just reached for their hands and held them tightly. Somewhere, miles away, Elijah Warren sat quietly in a care home garden. His hands, once calloused from carpentry, now trembled as they held a notebook. Inside, sketches of beds and chairs, the kind he used to make, and faces of 3 girls drawn from memory. He hadn't seen them again, they never visited, but he didn't expect them to. He no longer asked the nurse if they'd called. He just sat in silence. He had learned not to chase the past, only to remember it clearly enough not to repeat it. One morning, a nurse handed him a small package, no sender name. Inside was a photo. It showed 3 women, one in a doctor's coat, one in a hard hat beside a power plant. One sitting on a stage, holding a plaque labeled Innovator of the Year. He stared at the photo for a long time. On the back, a simple note. "We're doing just fine. No need to worry anymore." Tears welled in his eyes. He folded the photo and placed it in his chest pocket, next to his heart. Back in Umuzi, Ruth started volunteering part-time at the local school. She wasn't a teacher, but the kids loved her stories. She'd sit under the mango tree with them, telling tales of rivers and stars, of women who carried the sky on their backs, and daughters who grew up to hold the sun in their palms. One little girl once asked, "Miss Ruth, were you ever sad?" Ruth smiled. "Yes," she said, "but sadness didn't win." On her 60th birthday, Ava, Sophie, and Lily surprised her with a family video. It showed moments from their lives' graduations, apartment keys, passports stamped, awards won, babies born. Each clip ended with the same phrase, "We did it, Mommy, because you did it first." That night, as Ruth lay in bed, she thought about the road behind her. She remembered the pain, the nights she fed her children with borrowed coin and went to bed hungry. She remembered the day she was pushed out with 3 babies and no home, and she remembered the tiny voice in her head that whispered, "Keep going." Now, that whisper had grown into 3 powerful voices. Her daughters. The story of Ruth Delaney wasn't one of revenge, it was one of resurrection. She didn't raise girls to punish the man who left. She raised women to lead a world he'd never be ready for. And in doing so, she proved something few ever say aloud, that being left behind does not mean being broken. Sometimes it just means being set free. Final message for the audience, to every mother who stayed, to every daughter who rose, to every person told they weren't enough. May this story remind you, love does not always return the way you gave it, but strength always comes back with interest. Life lesson. What we leave behind matters more than what we build. Sometimes, the measure of a person isn't found in what they own, but in what they abandon. Elijah Warren built homes with his hands, but destroyed one with his pride. In chasing the illusion of legacy through a son, he cast aside the very daughters who would one day define true strength. This story reminds us that love is not a transaction, and children are not trophies, they are seeds. Given water and warmth, even the ones left in rocky soil can bloom. For older audiences, this is a call to reflect. Have we valued people for who they are, or only for what they give us? Have we honored quiet resilience or been blinded by old expectations? Ruth Delaney's quiet sacrifice became a foundation that outlasted rejection, poverty, and shame. And in the end, the world did not remember the man who left. It honored the woman who stayed. So ask yourself, what legacy are you leaving? One of ego or one of endurance? Because the most powerful inheritance we can give is dignity,